Pleased to welcome journalist and New York Times best-selling author Raymond Arroyo. Raymond, welcome to Victory. What do you make of Henry Cuellar? Pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, pro-border security. How is this guy surviving in the Democrat Party?
Well, look, I remember when I covered Capitol Hill when Joe Biden was a lot like Henry Cuellar. He was pro-life. He was pro-Second Amendment, too. This used to be allowed in the Democratic Party. So, look, Cuellar is playing to his constituency. They are not radicals on either end of the spectrum, and he knows that. So he's sort of defying the party orthodoxy, but that's a space that is increasingly contracting. You know, my governor here in Louisiana, also pro-life, pro-Second Amendment Democrat. It can be done, but it's rarer and rarer these days. So
right,
we'll see what happens and if the party will allow that.
That's exactly right. America First Republican Anthony Sabatini posted this statement, quote, "Number one way to stop mass shootings, make the King James Bible part of the core curriculum in kindergarten through 12th grade education." Besides lighting the liberal world on fire, what do you think of this idea?
Well, I have two thoughts on it. One, the Bible should be part of basic literacy for children. I mean, it is the bedrock of Shakespeare and so much of the canon plays and theater films. Without an understanding of basic biblical stories, one really can't interpret what's being implied by so many of the stories we encounter today. So I would argue the Bible should never have been taken out of curriculum, not necessarily as a religious text, but certainly as a literary text. My only worry about that, making it a requirement, who's teaching the Bible, the King James Bible, to these kids? That's the biggest concern I would have with that suggestion, and I'm not sure it's a wise one.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of books, let's talk about Speaking of books, let's talk about your new book, The Wise Men Who Found Christmas. Tell us about it.
Well, it is an adventure for the whole family. I discovered when I started looking into the wise men and the magi, everything we assume we know about them is actually incorrect. There were not three of them. They were not from the Far East, and they were not kings, despite the great song, "We Three Kings of Orient Are." The Bible only talks about three gifts, not three wise men. So I started picking through the history, both the biblical history as well as the political history of the time, and comparing it with the archaeological evidence. And what I discovered was this high-stakes adventure that I'd never heard before, where these magi were very likely consultants to the king of Nabateh, a kingdom in modern-day Jordan, about 300 miles from Jerusalem. And that's about the length of their journey, 3 to 5 days. So it's a new take on the reality, the true story of the wise men, put in the context of an adventure story for the whole family. I wanted to reawaken people to the reality here, the high-stakes drama of pursuing truth when you're called to it, and I guess more importantly, to rescue these wise men and the child they sought from mythology and fable, which too often they collapse into. So I think it's important to recognize the historical
Raymond, I'm
reality.
glad you did that. It is very important. I'm glad you did the history on it. Now, the ancient Latin Mass is finding a new audience with American Catholics, but Pope Francis is not a fan. Can you fill us in on the details of why?
Well, there are some in the church who have long wanted to outlaw the old Mass. And, this is the Mass that goes back really to the first century. I mean, its roots are in the Aramaic version of the Mass. In fact, some of the chants are even, holdovers from the Jewish celebrations. So, I mean, when you have that old Mass is really a living container, a vessel, if you will, of our Christian belief and worship of God. And when you try to, I think, say that's outlawed, I don't know how you really can do that. The former Pope, Pope Benedict, said you have to take, without the old Mass, the new Mass really has no foundation. And I tend to agree with him. There's a reference to, it's in both the Masses, the Order of Melchizedek. I'll bet many listening don't even know what that is, but that's the first temple priesthood, the royal priesthood. And in my research for this book, I discovered that these wise men could well be exiles of that first temple priesthood. The history of Christianity and the Jewish faith is so rich. It's important for us, I think, to take the totality of it, to consider all of it as Christians. And that's what I'm trying to do here. And that's what the Latin Mass does. It makes you confront both the past and the eternal at one moment.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Melchizedek, that goes all the way back to Abraham, even at the very beginnings of this. All right, so where do we get copies of your new book to give as Christmas presents? Because I encourage people to do it.
Wherever books are sold. You can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookseller. And my real hope is that families will read this together. Children have loved it, but the author's note is very detailed. I have a lot of biblical, historical tradition and quotes there to give people a wider sense of why I went down this path with this particular story. But I think they'll love it. And families have been writing me really nice letters since the book came out.
That's great. I encourage people to get it. Raymond Arroyo, thank you so much for being with us. Have a happy and blessed Thanksgiving.
And to you. Thank you. God bless you.